Hashtag Part 1. The Meridian Station hung in the void like a metallic snowflake, its 6 arms stretching out into the darkness, each one bustling with ships from 100 different worlds. Commander Marcus Chun stood at the observation deck of Docking Bay 7, watching the controlled chaos of interstellar commerce unfold before him. 3 years of diplomatic missions had taught him to read the subtle dance of alien body language. The way Krellian merchants fluttered their wing membranes when agitated, how Vorthan engineers clicked their mandibles in concentration, the careful distance Etherian ambassadors maintained from everyone else. But nothing in his training had prepared him for her. She moved through the crowd like smoke through fingers, her tall form draped in layers of shimmering fabric that seemed to shift between purple and deep blue with each step. The covering was unusual even by alien standards. Most species who required environmental suits wore practical, form-fitting gear. This was something else entirely. Ceremonial, perhaps, or hiding something. Marcus had first noticed her 3 days ago when his ship, the UES Harmony, had docked for resupply. She appeared at the same observation port every cycle, always alone, always watching the ships come and go. The fabric covered everything except her eyes, and those eyes were what kept drawing him back. They were almost human in shape, but larger, with irises that shifted color like oil on water. When she looked at the stars, there was a longing in them that Marcus recognized. He'd seen it in the mirror during his first year away from Earth. That ache for home that never quite faded. Commander Chun, his communicator buzzed. Lieutenant Torres's voice crackled through. The Etherian delegation is requesting to move up the meeting. Tell them 1600 hours as scheduled. Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the mysterious figure. No exceptions. Sir, they're being insistent. Then, they could be insistently patient. He clicked off the comm. The veiled woman turned slightly, and for a moment, their eyes met across the crowded promenade. Marcus felt his breath catch. There was recognition there, not of him personally, but of something deeper. She noticed him watching her these past days, just as he'd noticed her watching him. Before he could think better of it, Marcus found himself walking toward her. His security detail would have fits if they knew he was approaching an unknown alien without clearance. But something about her stillness, her solitude, made him push aside protocol. As he drew closer, he noticed more details. Her hands, when they occasionally emerged from the flowing sleeves, were graceful and long-fingered, with skin that seemed to have a faint luminescence. She was tall, at least 7 feet, but carried herself with a careful delicacy, as if afraid of taking up too much space. I'm sorry to bother you, Marcus said when he was close enough to speak without shouting over the station noise. I'm Commander Marcus Chun, United Earth Ship Harmony. I've noticed you here several times, and I wondered, are you waiting for someone? She went perfectly still. For a long moment, Marcus thought she might flee or simply ignore him. Then, in a voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, she spoke. I wait for no one, Commander. I watch. Her standard was perfect, with only the slightest accent he couldn't place. Up close, he could see that the fabric covering her face moved slightly with her breath, and there was a faint, pleasant scent, like rain on summer stones. What do you watch for? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Home. The word carried weight, centuries of it. Ships pass through here from every corner of the galaxy. I watch them all, hoping to see one from a place that no longer exists. May I ask what species? I mean, where you're from originally? Her eyes crinkled slightly, what might have been a smile beneath the veils. That is a complicated question, Commander. My people were called the Luminari, but I am the last. We're something between what you would call energy and matter. This form I wear is a compromise, a bridge between what I was and what this galaxy requires me to be. Marcus processed this. He'd heard whispers of the Luminari in diplomatic circles, an ancient race that had vanished centuries ago, leaving behind only ruins that defied physics and stories that bordered on myth. The last, he repeated softly. I can't imagine how lonely that must be. Loneliness is too small a word. Vara's voice carried no self-pity, only fact. But I survive. I watch. I remember. It is enough. Is it? The question slipped out before Marcus could stop it. Vara turned to look at him fully then, those color-shifting eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him want to fidget like a cadet. You are very bold for a human, Commander Chin. So I've been told. Occupational hazard of the diplomatic corps. We're trained to ask uncomfortable questions. And yet you haven't asked the most obvious one. Marcus smiled slightly. You mean why you keep your face covered? Most beings find it disturbing not to see who they're speaking with. Your species especially values facial expressions in communication. True, Marcus admitted. But I figure if you wanted me to see your face, you'd show it. Everyone's entitled to their privacy. Privacy. She seemed to taste the word. Another small concept for a vast thing. I cover my face not for privacy, Commander, but for mercy. Yours and mine. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, his communicator buzzed urgently. This time it was Captain Walsh, and her tone brooked no argument. Commander, your presence is required immediately. We've received priority orders from Earth Command. On my way, Marcus sighed. He looked back at Vara apologetically. Duty calls. But would you mind if I came back tomorrow? Same time. That maybe smile appeared in her eyes again. I am always here at this time, Commander. Whether you return or not is your choice. As Marcus hurried back toward the diplomatic sector, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just begun. He'd met hundreds of alien species in his career, formed friendships and alliances across the galaxy. But none of them had made him feel the way he felt after just a few minutes with Vara, like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to either fall or learn to fly. The urgent meeting turned out to be a developing situation in the Kepler colonies. Raiders using modified Vorthan technology to overwhelm defense grids. Marcus spent the next 6 hours in strategic planning, coordinating with Fleet Command and local authorities. But even as he worked through tactical scenarios and diplomatic solutions, part of his mind kept drifting back to the observation deck and a pair of eyes that held the grief of an entire species. When he finally made it back to his quarters, exhausted and running on stim tabs and determination, Marcus found himself staring at his reflection in the darkened window. He tried to imagine what it would be like to be the last human in the universe, watching alien ships pass by, always searching for one more glimpse of home. The thought made his chest tight with a sympathetic ache he couldn't quite name. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka, knocked and entered with a data pad full of reports that needed his signature. She paused, studying his face with the keen perception that made her invaluable. Long day, sir. Getting longer, Marcus admitted, taking the pad. Yuki, what do you know about the Luminari? Her eyebrows rose. The energy beings? Not much beyond the standard briefings. They disappeared about 300 years ago. What? Just curious. I met someone today who claimed to be the last of them. Yuki whistled low. That would be significant. The Luminari were supposed to be incredibly advanced, even by Etherian standards. Their ruins still baffle our best scientists. What happened to them? No one knows for sure. They just faded. Some say they evolved beyond physical form entirely. Others think they were wiped out by something they wouldn't or couldn't name. The archaeological records are frustratingly vague. She tilted her head. This person you met, do you believe them? Marcus thought about those ancient eyes, the weight of centuries in a simple word. Yeah, I do. After Yuki left, Marcus pulled up everything in the ship's database about the Luminari. The records were sparse. Some energy readings from dead worlds, artistic renderings based on fragmented descriptions, theories that range from scientific to wildly speculative. But one detail kept appearing in multiple accounts. The Luminari were shapeshifters of a sort, beings of pure energy who could take physical form but found it limiting, even painful. He thought about Vara's careful movements, the way she held herself like someone constantly aware of her own body. This form I wear is a compromise, she'd said. Unable to sleep, Marcus made his way to the ship's observation lounge. It was smaller than the station's grand viewports, but offered the same view of stars and void. He'd spent countless hours here over the years, finding peace in the vast emptiness that terrified so many others. Tonight, though, the stars seemed different. Each point of light represented not just the sun, but a potential home to someone. How many species had vanished between those stars? How many last survivors watched the void, hoping against hope? Can't sleep either? Marcus turned to find Dr. Sarah Chun, no relation, despite the shared surname, entering the lounge with 2 mugs of what smelled like real coffee. The ship's chief xenobiologist was one of the few people aboard who kept the same odd hours he did. Sarah, what got you up? Fascinating samples from the Vorthan delegation. Their symbiotic bacteria are unlike anything in our databases. She handed him a mug and settled into the chair beside him. But that's not why you're here, is it? Marcus had learned long ago that there was no point trying to deflect when Sarah was in one of her perceptive moods. I met someone interesting on the station today. The last of her species, she says. Heavy burden, Sarah said simply. I study life in all its forms. Marcus, the one constant I've found is that isolation, true isolation, is antithetical to thriving. We're all connected, whether we admit it or not. She seems to be managing. Surviving isn't thriving. Sarah sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Did you know that humans are considered somewhat unique in a galaxy for our pack bonding tendencies? I've heard the jokes. Humans will befriend anything. It's not a joke, though. It's maybe our greatest evolutionary advantage. Other species form bonds, of course, but humans? We'll look at a creature that by all logic should terrify us and decide it needs a name and a warm place to sleep. That capacity for connection across difference might be the most important trait we brought to the stars. Marcus thought about the way he'd been drawn to Vara's solitude, the immediate urge to offer comfort to someone, something he didn't even fully understand yet. Sometimes I wonder if it's also our greatest weakness. Only if you think caring is weakness. Sarah stood, leaving her half-finished coffee on the side table. Which I know you don't. Get some sleep, Marcus. Something tells me you're going to need it. After she left, Marcus remained in the lounge, watching stars while slowly passed. Somewhere in that vast darkness, entire civilizations had risen and fallen. Species had been born, lived, loved, and vanished without Earth ever knowing they existed. The scale of it should have made him feel insignificant. Instead, it made him think of a pair of color-shifting eyes and a voice like wind chimes, watching those same stars and remembering when they looked different. He finally made his way back to his quarters as the ship's artificial dawn began to lighten the corridors. Today, technically, he would return to the observation deck. He would stand beside the last of the Luminari and watch the ships pass by. And maybe if he was very careful and very patient, he might learn why she thought showing her face would be an act of cruelty. But first, he had a diplomatic crisis to resolve, reports to file, and a crew to lead. The grand mysteries of the universe would have to wait their turn. As he fell into bed, Marcus's last thought was of something his academy xenopsychology professor had said years ago. The greatest discoveries always begin with the simplest human act, one person reaching out to another across the void. Tomorrow, he would reach out again. And perhaps, if he was lucky, Vara would reach back. Part 2 Marcus arrived at the observation deck early, carrying 2 containers of what the station vendors optimistically called coffee. He wasn't sure if Vara even consumed liquids, but the gesture mattered more than the practicality. The morning crowd was thinner, mostly night shift workers heading home and early merchants setting up shop. She was already there, standing in the exact same spot as yesterday. The morning light from the local star caught her veils differently, revealing hints of pattern in the fabric, complex geometric designs that seemed to shift and flow independent of her movement. "Good morning, Vara," he said, approaching slowly to give her time to acknowledge him. "I brought coffee. I realized after I bought it that I have no idea if you drink, well, anything." She turned, those remarkable eyes crinkling with what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Your thoughtfulness is appreciated, Commander. I can consume liquids in this form, though I rarely do. Would you like to try it anyway?" He offered one of the containers. Vara studied it for a moment, then accepted it with those graceful, faintly glowing hands. She held it delicately, as if it were made of spun glass. The human obsession with bitter stimulants has always fascinated other species. Your people find comfort in shared consumption rituals. Guilty as charged, Marcus admitted, taking a sip of his own coffee. Though I'd argue it's less about the caffeine and more about the excuse to slow down and connect with someone. Is that what this is? An excuse to connect. Marcus met her gaze steadily. I don't need an excuse for that. The coffee's just a bonus. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching a massive Krellian freighter navigate into docking position. Vara held the coffee container, but didn't drink, seemingly content to simply experience its warmth through her fingers. You came back, she observed eventually. I said I would. Many say things they don't mean, especially to those they pity. I don't pity you, Marcus said firmly. Respect, yes. Curiosity, absolutely. But not pity. Vara tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but wasn't. You are unusual, Marcus-chun, even for a human. So people keep telling me, though I'm starting to think unusual might just be another word for human in the galactic community. Perhaps. She finally raised the coffee container, and Marcus caught a glimpse of her lifting the veil, just enough to take a small sip. The motion was so quick he couldn't see anything beneath. Interesting. It tastes like determination, with undertones of regret. Marcus laughed, surprised. That's probably the most accurate description of station coffee I've ever heard. Do all human beverages encode emotional states? Not intentionally, though my grandmother would argue that her tea could cure heartbreak and her soup could mend souls. Wise woman. The luminary understood that sustenance was never merely physical. Vara set the coffee aside carefully. Tell me about her. Your grandmother. So Marcus did. He told her about growing up in New Shanghai, about his grandmother who insisted on maintaining old traditions even as humanity reached for the stars. He talked about the small garden she kept on their apartment's balcony, growing vegetables in defiance of perfectly good synthesizers. He shared how she'd made him promise to find beauty in the void between stars, to remember that empty space wasn't empty at all but full of possibility. Vara listened with the kind of attention that made him feel truly heard. She asked thoughtful questions, drew connections he hadn't seen, and shared her own observations about humanity's peculiar relationship with tradition and progress. Your species fascinates me, she said as a group of human traders laughed at something on their tablets nearby. You cling to your past while racing toward the future. Most species choose one or the other. Maybe that's why we're good at building bridges between worlds, Marcus suggested. We're already living contradictions. Perhaps that's why you don't flee from me, Vara mused. Other beings sense something wrong when they look at me. Even through the veils, they know I'm not as I should be. Different doesn't mean wrong. You haven't seen what lies beneath these coverings. No, Marcus agreed. But I've seen your kindness and how you move carefully through crowds to avoid disturbing others. I've heard wisdom in your words and loneliness in your silence. I've watched you search the stars with hope that should have died centuries ago, but didn't. Whatever form you wear, those things are real. Vara went very still. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. You speak of things you don't understand. Then, help me understand. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she raised one hand and pulled back a single layer of her veils. Not from her face, but from her arm. Marcus had seen many alien forms in his career, but nothing quite prepared him for what lay beneath. Vara's skin, if it could be called skin, was translucent, with patterns of light flowing beneath like captured aurora. He could see deeper structures that defied easy categorization, geometries that hurt to look at directly, as if his human brain couldn't quite process what his eyes were seeing. This is the compromise, she said softly. Neither energy nor flesh, neither here nor there. I exist between states, Marcus-chun. It causes me constant discomfort, but it allows me to interact with your physical world. Without thinking, Marcus reached out, stopping just short of touching. May I? Vara's eyes widened slightly. You want to? If you're comfortable with it. She extended her arm slowly, as if expecting him to change his mind. When his fingers made contact, Marcus felt a sensation like touching warm silk that had been electrified. Not painful, but definitely alien. The patterns of light under her skin seemed to respond to his touch, swirling and concentrating where their skin met. Remarkable, he breathed. You're not disgusted? Why would I be? You're beautiful. The words came out without thought, but Marcus didn't try to take them back. They were true. Vara pulled her arm back quickly, rewrapping it in the protective layers. You don't understand what you're saying. Then, explain it to me. I can't. Not here. Not now. She turned away from him, facing the stars again. You should go, Commander. Your duty requires you elsewhere. Marcus wanted to protest, but something in her tone stopped him. He'd pushed enough for one day. Tomorrow, I am always here. As he walked back to his ship, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just passed some sort of test, or failed one. The sensation of her skin beneath his fingers lingered, along with questions that multiplied with each step. The next few days fell into a pattern. Marcus would meet Vara at the observation deck, bringing coffee and conversation. They talked about everything and nothing: philosophy, music, the peculiar habits of different species, the way certain stars looked like hope, and others like sorrow. She never removed her veils again, but something had shifted between them after that moment of contact. Other beings gave them a wide berth, Marcus noticed. The usual station traffic flowed around them like water around a stone. He caught whispers, sometimes speculation about what a human commander was doing with the station's mysterious permanent resident. "Doesn't it bother you?" Lieutenant Torres asked one evening after a particularly grueling negotiation session with the Vorthan Trade Guild. "The way people talk." Marcus looked up from his reports. "About you and the Veiled Woman." "Sir," she added belatedly, "the crews noticed you've been spending time together. Is it affecting ship operations?" "No, sir. Just people worry. She's been on this station for decades, they say. Never shows her face, never leaves, just watches the ships. Some of the other species say she's cursed." "Since when do we believe in curses, Lieutenant?" Torres shifted uncomfortably. "We don't, sir. But the Etherians won't go near her. The Krellians actively avoid that section of the station when she's there. Even the Vorthans, and they'll trade with anyone, won't approach her. Fear of the unknown," Marcus said, returning to his work. "We're supposed to be better than that." But Torres's words stayed with him. That night, he accessed the station's records, using his diplomatic clearance to dig deeper than most could. Vara had indeed been there for 43 standard years, listed simply as permanent resident, species undetermined. She paid for her tiny quarter somehow. The records showed regular credit transfers, but no source of income. No one knew where she'd come from or why she stayed. The next morning, he brought tea instead of coffee, a blend his grandmother had favored, supposed to promote clarity and calm. Vara accepted it with what he'd learned to recognize as pleased surprise. "You research me," she said, not making it a question. "A little," Marcus admitted. 43 years is a long time to watch ships. A heartbeat for my kind, or what my kind were." She held the tea container close, breathing in the steam through her veils. "You're wondering why I stay. Among other things. Where else would I go? This station is a crossroads. If any Luminari survived, if any found a way to return from what we became, they would pass through here eventually. What did you become?" Vara was quiet for so long Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics he hadn't heard before, as if multiple versions of her were speaking in near unison. "We thought we were evolving, transcending the physical, becoming pure consciousness. It was meant to be beautiful, a joining of all minds, all souls, into something greater." The harmonics faded, leaving only sadness. "But consciousness without form is like music without air. It simply disperses. By the time we realized our mistake, most were already gone. But not you. I was young, foolish, in love with the physical world, even as my elders spoke of abandoning it." She touched her veils lightly. "I try to hold both states at once. The result is this: neither one thing nor the other, unable to fully return to either state." Marcus absorbed this, fitting it together with what he'd observed. "That's why you cover yourself. The physical form is painful for others to see because it's partially not there. Partially not there. Partially too much there. I exist in overlapping states that your physics says are impossible. Most beings' brains cannot process what they see, so they feel fear, revulsion, even madness in some cases. But you showed me your arm. A small test. You passed. And if I'd failed, then you would have fled, and I would have continued watching the ships alone." She turned to him then, those color-shifting eyes serious. "But you didn't flee. You said I was beautiful. Why?" Marcus considered his words carefully. "Because you are. Not just physically, though what I saw was genuinely amazing, but beautiful in your hope, your persistence, your loneliness transformed into patience. Beautiful in the way you've taken an impossible situation and found a way to continue. You see much that isn't there, Commander. I see what is there. Maybe that's what the others are missing." A group of Etherian diplomats glided past, their crystalline forms chiming with agitation when they noticed Vara. They made a wide arc around her, their fear palpable even to Marcus's human senses. "That doesn't anger you?" he asked. "Why waste energy on anger?" "They fear what they don't understand. It's a survival instinct older than conscious thought." She paused. "Though I admit, the loneliness is sometimes difficult." "Then, let me help with that." "You already are." The smile was in her eyes again. "But, Marcus, you must understand, this cannot last. Your ship will leave soon. Your mission will take you elsewhere. And I will remain here, watching the ships. Maybe I'll request a permanent posting to the station. You would abandon your career progression for a mystery you've known mere days?" "I've made stranger choices." He grinned. "Ask anyone who's served with me." That startled a sound from her that might have been laughter, like bells ringing in multiple dimensions. "You are impossible. So are you, according to physics. Maybe we match." They were interrupted by an urgent calm from the Harmony. A situation was developing 2 systems over, raiders again, but this time they'd taken hostages from multiple species. Marcus was needed for emergency planning. As he prepared to leave, Vara caught his sleeve gently. "Be careful, Marcus-chun. The universe has taken much from me. I would not see it take you too." "I'll come back," he promised. "I always do." Her fingers tightened briefly on his sleeve. "See that you do." The crisis took 6 days to resolve. 6 days of careful negotiation, strategic planning, and ultimately a carefully coordinated rescue operation that freed all hostages with minimal casualties. Marcus threw himself into the work with his usual intensity, but in quiet moments, and there were few, he found himself thinking about the observation deck and wondering if Vara still stood there, waiting and watching. When the Harmony finally returned to Meridian Station, Marcus barely waited for the docking clamps to engage before he was moving through the corridors. His crew, exhausted from the mission, didn't question his urgency. The observation deck was crowded with the usual evening traffic, but Vara wasn't in her customary spot. Marcus felt an unexpected spike of panic. Had something happened? Had she finally given up her vigil? He found her eventually, sitting in a small alcove off the main promenade. She was hunched over slightly, her veils disheveled in a way he'd never seen before. "Vara." She looked up, and he could see exhaustion in those remarkable eyes. "Marcus, you came back. I said I would. Are you all right?" "I'm tired. Sometimes the effort of maintaining this form becomes overwhelming. I should return to my quarters. Let me help you." She hesitated, then nodded. When she stood, she swayed slightly, and Marcus moved without thinking to steady her. The contact sent that same electric silk sensation through his hands, but stronger now, as if her control was slipping. Her quarters were small, but meticulously clean, with walls covered in what looked like star charts from hundreds of different worlds and eras. She sank onto a low couch with obvious relief. "You pushed yourself too hard," Marcus observed, sitting carefully beside her. "Why?" "I was concerned. The news feeds spoke of casualties in the hostage situation. I didn't know." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. "You were worried about me? It seems I'm not as detached as I believed." She pulled her veils tighter around herself. "This is unwise. Attachment brings pain, and I've had enough of that for several lifetimes. Maybe connection is worth a risk. You speak from a lifespan of mere decades. I have centuries ahead, most of them alone. Only if you choose to be alone." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached up and pulled back the first layer of veils from her face. Marcus's breath caught. Her features were humanoid in basic structure, but transformed by that same translucent quality he'd seen on her arm. Light moved beneath her skin in patterns that reminded him of neural pathways, of stellar formations, of thoughts made visible. Her mouth was fuller than humans, her bone structure more angular, but it was her expression that struck him most. Vulnerable, hopeful, terrified. "This is what I am," she whispered. "This is why they flee." Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face gently, marveling at the warmth and strange electricity of her skin. "You're extraordinary. I'm a mistake. A failed transcendence caught between states." "You're a survivor," he corrected. "And you're beautiful. Not despite what you are, but because of it." Tears, or something like them, welled in her eyes, catching the light like prisms. You truly see no horror in this. I see someone who's been alone too long. Someone who's convinced herself that isolation is safety. He smiled softly. I see someone I very much want to kiss, if she'd allow it. Vara's eyes widened. That could be dangerous. The energy differential. Worth the risk, Marcus said firmly. But only if you want to. For a moment that stretched like eternity, she searched his face. Then, with a courage that humbled him, she leaned forward. The kiss was like touching a live wire wrapped in silk, like tasting starlight, like falling into the space between atoms. Marcus felt his nervous system light up in ways that should have been painful, but weren't, just overwhelmingly, impossibly intense. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard, and the patterns beneath Vara's skin were swirling like galaxies being born. That was... Marcus tried to find words, and failed. Unwise, Vara finished, but she was smiling, the first true smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. Dangerous. Impossible. Perfect, Marcus added, and kissed her again. Later, as they sat together in her small quarters, Vara gradually removed more of her veils. Each revelation showed him new wonders, skin that shifted between states, geometries that defied perception, beauty that transcended any single definition. She told him about her past, about the Luminari's great experiment and its tragic end. She spoke of centuries of loneliness, of watching civilizations rise and fall, of hope maintained against all logic. I don't know what this is, she admitted as the station's artificial night deepened around them. I don't know what we're doing. We're connecting, Marcus said simply. Two impossible beings finding each other in an impossible universe. Seems appropriate to me. Your crew will think you've lost your mind. The other species already whisper about the human who courts disaster. Let them whisper. I've been called worse things in better company. She laughed again, that multidimensional sound that made reality hiccup. What am I to do with you, Marcus Chun? Keep me, he suggested. I'm told I'm useful to have around. Good in a crisis. Make decent coffee. Tell terrible jokes. And if your form burns out from exposure to my energy fields, if my presence drives you mad as it has others, then we'll face that together. But, Vara, I've spent 3 years building bridges between species that have nothing in common but the ability to communicate. I've seen connections form across every barrier the universe can create. Why should ours be any different? She was quiet for a long time, her hand resting in his, energy flowing between them in patterns that felt increasingly natural. Finally, she spoke. The Luminari had a concept, Siltura. It means the moment when two incompatible states find harmony. We thought it was theoretical, impossible. But perhaps, she squeezed his hand gently. Perhaps we were simply looking in the wrong places. Marcus smiled, feeling the truth of it in his bones. Whatever came next, whatever challenges their impossible connection would bring, they would face it together. The last of the Luminari, and a human who couldn't leave well enough alone, writing a new chapter in the vast story of the universe. Outside her window, ships continued their eternal dance, carrying beings between stars. But for the first time in decades, Vara wasn't watching them. She had found something better than the hope of return. She had found a reason to stay. Hashtag Part 3, the scientific community's reaction to Marcus and Vara's relationship could best be described as academically hysterical. Within 2 weeks of their first public appearance together, Vara partially unveiled, Marcus's hand in hers. 3 separate xenobiology teams had requested permission to study them. Marcus declined them all with varying degrees of politeness. They act like we're some kind of experiment, he complained to Dr. Sarah Chun over drinks in the Harmonies Lounge. Yesterday, a Vorthan researcher actually followed us through the market sector, taking readings. Sarah hid her smile behind her glass. Can you blame them? Energy matter hybrid being maintains physical contact with baseline human without causing cellular disruption or neural damage. You're breaking about 15 known laws of physics just by holding hands. We're not breaking anything. The laws were just incomplete. Spoken like a true diplomat. How is Vara handling the attention? Marcus's expression softened. Better than I expected. She spent so long being avoided that being studied is almost a relief, though she draws the line at invasive scans. Reasonable. Has she shown you more of her true form? Gradually, Marcus stared into his drink, remembering the night before. Vara had removed all her veils in the privacy of her quarters, revealing the full impossibility of her existence. A being of light and thought-given form, patterns of energy that spoke of dimensions beyond human comprehension. There aren't words, Sarah. Beautiful doesn't begin to cover it. Terrifying doesn't either. It's like looking at the birth of stars, at the math behind reality itself. And it doesn't hurt you. The opposite. The more time we spend together, the more my nervous system seems to adapt. Yesterday, she accidentally shifted partially out of phase, something that would have sent most beings into seizures. And I just felt warm. Connected. Sarah leaned forward, her scientific curiosity evident. Marcus, do you realize what this might mean? If humans can adapt to luminary energy fields, if we can bridge that gap between states of being, it means the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we thought, Marcus interrupted gently. But, Sarah, this isn't about science. It's about her. About us. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Though I notice you're deflecting from the real question. How serious is this? Marcus met her gaze steadily. I've put in for a transfer to the station's diplomatic corps. Permanent posting. Sarah whistled low. That'll be a career killer. Station postings are where ambitious commanders go to stagnate. Only if you measure success by rank and recognition. I've found something more important than climbing the ladder. She must be extraordinary. She is, but it's more than that. Marcus struggled to find the right words. You know how they say humans pack bond with anything? Well, maybe that's not a quirk or a weakness. Maybe it's what we're for. To be the species that looks at the impossible and says yes, but have you tried being friends? Before Sarah could respond, Marcus's communicator chimed. Vara's musical voice came through, tinged with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Marcus? Could you come to the observation deck? There's someone here you should meet. The urgency in her tone had Marcus moving before she'd finished speaking. He found Vara at their usual spot, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a figure in similar concealing robes, though these were deep crimson rather than blue-purple. The stranger was shorter than Vara, more compact, and radiated a different kind of energy, sharper, more volatile. Marcus, Vara said, her voice carefully controlled. This is Kane. He's Luminari. Marcus felt his world tilt. Another Luminari. After all Vara's certainty that she was the last, here stood proof that she wasn't alone. He should have been happy for her. Instead, something cold settled in his stomach at the way Kane stood too close to her, at the possessive angle of his body. So, Kane said, his voice like grinding crystal, you're the human who thinks he can touch the untouchable. I'm Marcus Chun. Marcus replied evenly, extending his hand. It's an honor to meet another of Vara's people. Kane ignored the offer hand. Her people. Yes, that's what we need to discuss. He turned to Vara, switching to a language that sounded like harmonizing energy fields. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone, urgent, demanding, with an undercurrent of anger. Vara responded in the same language, her harmonics defensive. The conversation grew heated, drawing stares from passing beings who hurried away from the electric tension building between the two Luminari. Perhaps we should take this somewhere private, Marcus suggested. Kane finally looked at him directly, and Marcus had a fight not to step back. Where Vara's eyes held depth and warmth, Kane's were like staring into a nuclear reactor. Powerful, unstable, dangerous. Yes, Kane said. Privacy would be best for what comes next. They ended up in a neutral meeting room in the diplomatic sector. Marcus noticed how Kane moved, aggressive where Vara was careful, taking up space rather than minimizing his presence. The contrast was striking. Once the door sealed, Kane shed his outer robes in one fluid motion. His form was similar to Vara's in basic structure, but radically different in execution. Where her energy patterns flowed like water, his crackled like lightning. Where she was translucent, he was almost blindingly bright. The room's temperature rose noticeably. Now then, Kane said, his attention laser-focused on Vara. Explain to me why I find you corrupted by physical attachment to this creature. Careful, Marcus said softly. The insult was clear despite the mild words. Marcus, please, Vara touched his arm lightly. To Kane, she said, I thought I was alone. We all thought that we had failed. That the transcendence was death. Cain laughed bitterly. No, dear one. Only the weak dissipated. The strong adapted, evolved, became what we were meant to be. Pure consciousness, free of form's limitations. Then, why are you here, wearing form? Vara challenged. To find the lost ones. To bring them home. His energy patterns flared. To save you from this degradation. It's not degradation, Vara said firmly. I found something here, Cain. Connection, understanding, love, love. The word cracked like a whip. You speak of love with a mayfly? A being whose entire existence is less than one of your meditative cycles. Hey, Marcus interjected, but Vara squeezed his hand, warning him to stay calm. How many survived? She asked instead. How many Luminari still exist? Dozens. Perhaps 100. Scattered across dimensions you can't imagine, exploring realms of pure thought. Cain moved closer to her, his energy field brushing against hers in a way that made Marcus's teeth ache. You could join us, Vara. Leave this half-life behind. Transcend truly, as you're meant to. At what cost? No cost. Freedom. You would shed this painful compromise of a form, leave behind the anchor of physical attachment. He gestured dismissively at Marcus. Be what you were born to be. I was born in the physical realm, Vara said quietly. I loved it then, and I love it now. If transcendence means abandoning that, it means evolving beyond it. Cain's patience finally snapped. The room's lights flickered as his energy spiked. You always were too attached to the material. Even before the change, you spent more time with the lesser races than with your own kind. Lesser races? Marcus stepped forward despite Vara's restraining hand. Let me guess. Anyone who isn't pure energy doesn't count? Cain's attention shifted to Marcus fully for the first time. The weight of it was crushing. You dare speak to me, ephemeral? You will be dust before Vara has aged a day. You think your brief chemical attraction to her form gives you standing here. No, Marcus said steadily. I think my love for her gives me standing. All of her, not just the form. Love. Cain practically spat the word. You can't even perceive what she truly is. Your limited senses show you a fraction of her existence, and you call that knowledge? That connection? Then, show me, Marcus challenged. If I'm so limited, educate me. Cain smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. As you wish. The attack, for that's what it was, hit Marcus like a tidal wave of pure sensory data. Suddenly, he could see across spectrums he didn't have names for, perceived dimensions that folded in on themselves, feel the cosmic wind between stars. It should have destroyed his mind. It should have left him gibbering on the floor. Instead, something deep in his neurons fired in recognition. The patterns Vara had been showing him for weeks had prepared pathways, created buffers. He saw Cain's true form, brilliant, terrible, vast, but he also saw the fear beneath the power. The loneliness that drove beings to abandon connection rather than risk loss. Stop! Vara's voice rang with harmonics that made reality shiver. She moved between them, her own energy flaring in a protective shield. Cain, enough. Cain withdrew his assault, looking genuinely startled. He should be catatonic. How? Because humans adapt, Marcus said, swaying but standing. Because Vara's been teaching me without realizing it. Because connection goes both ways. He wiped blood from his nose but kept his eyes on Cain. You gave up on the physical world because it hurt to be limited, but you lost something in the transcendence, didn't you? The ability to truly touch another being. To be surprised. To grow through contact with difference. Philosophical drivel from a race barely out of its gravity well. Cain sneered, but there was uncertainty in his energy patterns now. Is it? Vara moved to Marcus's side, checking him for damage with gentle touches. When did you last feel something new, Cain? When did you last learn rather than simply know? When did you last feel joy that wasn't just a memory of joy? Marcus added, when did you discover something that changed you? Cain was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its crystalline edge. You've been corrupted by their thinking, Vara. Their small lives and smaller dreams. Or expanded by them, Vara countered. Cain, I mourned our people for centuries. I thought I'd failed by being unable to fully transcend. But what if the failure was in trying to transcend it all? What if growth means synthesis, not abandonment? You would choose this half-existence? This compromise? I choose connection. I choose growth through difficulty. I choose love that transcends form while still celebrating it. She took Marcus's hand, and their combined energy fields created something new. Neither purely physical nor purely energetic, but somehow both. I choose the harder path because it leads somewhere new. Kane stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. The others won't understand. They'll say you've devolved, become lesser. Then, they've forgotten what evolution really means, Varus said gently. It's not about becoming pure or perfect. It's about becoming more complex, more adapted, more capable of survival in changing conditions. And what could he possibly offer that our kind cannot? The question seemed torn from Kane unwillingly. Marcus felt Vara's hand tighten in his. Surprise, she said simply. Marcus surprises me every day. His perspectives, his choices, his ability to see beauty where others see impossibility. When did you last experience genuine surprise, Kane? The other Luminari was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if he'd simply phase out without answering. Finally, in a voice much smaller than before, he said, "Not for longer than your human has been alive." Then, perhaps, Varus suggested carefully, the question isn't whether I should rejoin the transcended. Perhaps it's whether others might want to explore a different path. Preposterous. The energy requirements alone to maintain stable form are manageable with practice and purpose, Vara interrupted. I've proven that. And with a partner who can help anchor you in the physical. She let the suggestion hang in the air. Marcus watched Kane's energy patterns shift through what he was learning to recognize as deep thought. The hostile brilliance was banking down to something more like curiosity. This is unprecedented, Kane muttered. Luminari partnering with physical beings for stability rather than transcendence. It goes against everything we believed. So did transcendence itself. Once, Vara reminded him. We were always explorers, Kane. Why should that stop now? Kane looked between them. Really looked, Marcus could tell. Whatever he saw made his form flicker with uncertainty. I need to process this. The others will want to know what I've found. Tell them the truth, Varus said. Tell them there's another way. Not better or worse, just different. A path for those who find pure consciousness as limiting as pure physicality. And if they decide you're a threat to our evolution, if they seek to force you back, Marcus stepped forward. Then they'll find humans don't give up our pack bonds easily. Vara isn't alone anymore. Kane studied him with those reactor core eyes. No, I suppose she isn't. How remarkably inefficient. But there was something almost wistful in his tone. I will need to observe more before I make my report. To understand this synthesis you speak of. You're welcome to stay on the station, Marcus offered. I could arrange quarters. I don't require quarters. I require data. Kane pulled his robes back on, dimming his painful brightness. I will observe. Do not interfere. He moved toward the door, then paused. Vara, in all the dimensions I've explored, the equations I've become, I have never seen probability lines quite like the one surrounding you two. It's unsettling. Good, Vara said with a smile in her voice. Unsettled is where growth begins. After Kane left, Marcus sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting him all at once. Vara knelt beside him, her hands gentle on his face as she checked for lasting damage from Kane's assault. I'm sorry, she murmured. I never imagined. I truly thought I was alone. Don't apologize. This is good news, Vara. You have people out there. People who think I'm broken. Who see what we have as devolution. People who haven't experienced it yet. Marcus corrected. Kane was curious by the end. Curious is better than certain. Vara studied his face, her impossible eyes soft with emotion. You stood up to him, a being who could scatter your atoms with a thought, and you stood your ground. I had something worth standing for. Marcus caught her hands in his. Besides, I had excellent shielding. Still, it was foolish, brave, and wonderful, and absolutely foolish. Human specialty. We're working on adding it to our diplomatic credentials. She laughed, that multidimensional chime that made his neurons sing. What am I to do with a species that looks at cosmic horror and offers it coffee? Love us, hopefully. One specific member of the species, anyway. Her expression grew serious. This changes things. If there are other Luminari, if they decide to intervene, then we'll face that together. Like we face everything else. Your lifespan is what it is. But, Vara, whether I have 50 more years or 50 minutes, I want to spend them with you. Building something new, proving that connection across difference isn't just possible, but necessary. She kissed him then, and Marcus felt the universe expand. Each kiss was different as they learned each other, as his nervous system continued its impossible adaptation. This one tasted of starlight and possibility of futures being written and paths diverging from prediction. When they parted, Vara's form was shimmering more than usual, energy patterns dancing with what he'd learned was joy. The others won't understand at first. They might try to separate us. Let them try. Humans are remarkably stubborn when it comes to love. And Luminari are remarkably adaptable when they choose to be. She helped him to his feet. Cool, mate. Let's go show Kane what synthesis looks like in practice. He's probably lurking in the observation deck, taking readings and pretending he's not fascinated. As they walked hand in hand through the station, Marcus reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd come to the stars to build bridges between species. He'd never imagined he'd end up building one between states of existence themselves. But then, the best discoveries were always the ones you never saw coming. In the observation deck, they found Kane exactly where Vara had predicted, poorly hidden behind a pillar, his energy fields practically vibrating with the effort of containing his curiosity. Other beings gave him an even wider berth than they gave Vara, sensing the barely controlled power beneath his robes. The sociological implications alone, they heard him muttering in harmonics. If physical beings can anchor energy beings, if the symbiosis is mutualistic rather than parasitic, you could just ask, Marcus called out. We're happy to answer questions. Kane emerged from his hiding spot with as much dignity as possible. I am observing. It is a valid scientific method. So, this conversation, Vara said gently. Would you like to join us for what Marcus calls coffee? It's a human bonding ritual involving bitter, liquid stimulants. That would be... Kane's form flickered with uncertainty. I don't consume physical substances anymore. Neither did I, until recently, Vara admitted. It's an interesting experience. Not necessary, but pleasant, grounding. Marcus watched the interplay between the two Luminari with fascination. Where Vara had chosen physical sensation as a way to stay connected, Kane had rejected it entirely. The contrast was telling. One beverage, Kane said finally, for observational purposes. As they made their way to the cafe sector, Marcus caught Vara's eye and smiled. She'd said surprise was what he offered her, but she surprised him too. Her courage in facing someone from her past, her willingness to stand firm in her choices, her ability to offer compassion even to those who rejected her path. It all reminded him why he'd fallen for her in the first place. The cafe was busy with the evening crowd, and their entrance caused the usual stir. Vara had become a familiar sight over the weeks, but Kane's raw energy made several patrons relocate to farther tables. The Trellin barista, bless their professional hearts, simply asked for their order without comment. As they found a table in the corner, Marcus noticed something interesting. A young Krellian at a nearby table kept glancing at them, not with the usual fear, but with what looked like curiosity. When they made eye contact, the Krellian quickly looked away, wing membranes flushing purple with embarrassment. We're becoming a tourist attraction, Marcus murmured to Vara. Change often draws attention, she replied. Not all of it negative. Kane held his coffee cup like it might explode, staring at the dark liquid with intense focus. Humans drink this voluntarily? Daily. Sometimes hourly, Marcus confirmed. It's an acquired taste. Everything physical is, Vara added. But acquisition itself has value. The process of learning to appreciate something foreign. Kane took the tiniest possible sip, and his entire form spasmed. It's aggressive. Assertive. It tastes like determination. Welcome to human culture, Marcus said dryly. We're basically caffeinated determination in bipedal form. Yet you partner with beings of pure energy. You adapt to impossibility. Kane set the cup down carefully. Your species makes no logical sense. Logic is overrated, Marcus replied. Ask any human philosopher. We prefer terms like working it out as we go and seem like a good idea at the time. And yet it works, Vara added. Humans have formed more interspecies alliances than any other race in the known galaxy. Their adaptability isn't despite their logic, but because of it. Chaos as evolution catalyst, Kane mused. His energy patterns had settled into something less aggressive, more contemplative. The transcended would call it regression. What do you call it? Marcus asked. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Intriguing, he finally admitted. Disturbing, illogical, potentially catastrophic, but intriguing. It was a start. Over the next several days, Kane became a constant shadow to their activities. He observed them in the markets, at diplomatic functions, during quiet moments in Vara's quarters. His presence was initially disruptive. Other beings were even more nervous with two Luminari in proximity, but gradually became just another oddity in the station's collection of oddities. More importantly, Marcus watched Kane slowly begin to engage with the physical world again. First, it was questions about textures and temperatures. Then, cautious experiments with different foods and beverages. Finally, actual conversations with other beings, starting with a remarkably patient Trellin barista who'd become used to serving impossible customers. He's remembering, Vara said one evening as they watched Kane engage in what appeared to be an animated discussion about coffee brewing techniques. What it felt like to be curious about small things. Think he'll stay? I don't know. But he'll carry the questions with him wherever he goes. And questions, Marcus, are how evolution begins. A week after Kane's arrival, 3 more Luminari appeared at the station. These ones didn't bother with robes or pretense. They manifested directly in the diplomatic sector, setting off every energy alarm the station possessed. Marcus and Vara arrived to find Kane facing off against the newcomers, his form blazing brighter than they'd ever seen it. The 3 new arrivals were even less human-shaped than Kane, existing as geometric patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. Cannot allow this contamination to spread, one was saying in harmonics that made the walls vibrate. The physical realm is a trap. Kane, you know this. I know what we assumed, Kane responded. But assumptions require testing. Vara has spent centuries testing. Perhaps we should listen to her results. Vara has fallen. She clings to form out of fear of true transcendence. I cling to form out of love for it, Vara said, stepping forward with Marcus at her side. There's a difference. The 3 newcomers turned their attention to her, and Marcus felt their disgust like radiation. You would bind yourself to entropy, to decay, to limitation, to growth, Vara corrected, to surprise, to connection that transcends the boundaries you've built. And this human, the contempt in the harmonics was palpable. This mayfly you've attached yourself to? What happens when his brief, chemical existence ends? Will you transcend then, when grief breaks your attachment to form? Marcus felt Vara tense beside him, but before she could respond, he stepped forward. Then she'll grieve, and heal, and remember, and maybe find connection again or maybe not. But she'll have lived, really lived, not just existed in perfect stasis. You dare. I dare because that's what humans do. We dare to love beings we shouldn't be able to touch. We dare to find beauty in impossibility. We dare to believe that connection matters more than perfection. He took Vara's hand, feeling their energy fields merge. And apparently, we dare to change the minds of energy beings who thought they knew everything. One of the 3 moved closer, its pattern shifting in what might have been curiosity. You feel no pain from her touch? No cellular disruption. Only connection. My nervous system adapted, evolved, changed to meet her halfway. Impossible. So everyone keeps saying. Yet here we are. The 3 beings conferred in harmonics, too complex for Marcus to follow. Finally, they turned back to Kane. You will continue observing? I will. There are implications here that require study. And you, Vara? You truly choose this path. I choose exploration, Vara said firmly. As we always have. The only difference is the direction I'm exploring. Then, we will report to the collective. They will decide how to proceed. The lead being's pattern shifted toward what might have been disappointment. You were one of our brightest, Vara. To see you diminished, enhanced, Marcus interrupted. Made more complex, more capable, more complete. Matter-bound perspectives, the being dismissed. But there was something in its harmonics, a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. They left as suddenly as they'd arrived, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and possibility. Well, Kane said after a moment of silence, that could have gone worse. They'll be back, Vara said, with more questions or more arguments. Good, Marcus said, surprising them both. Questions we can work with. And arguments just mean they're not sure they're right anymore. Kane studied him with those nuclear eyes. You truly believe you can change the minds of beings who've existed as pure thought for centuries? I believe connection changes everyone it touches, even those who think they're beyond change. Marcus skvisi voras hand. After all, it changed me. A month ago, I was just another diplomatic commander building standard bridges. Now I'm part of something impossible and wonderful and absolutely worth fighting for. Fighting, Kane mused, such a physical concept. Yet perhaps some things are worth the inefficiency of conflict. It was definitely progress. That night, in the privacy of Vara's quarters, they held each other close and didn't speak about endings. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, and ships carried beings between worlds, and somewhere in dimensions beyond physical space, the Luminari Collective debated what to do about one of their own who'd chosen love over transcendence. But in that moment, none of it mattered except the warmth between them, the impossible electricity of their touch, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as they'd faced everything else, together, surprising each other, creating something new with every passing moment. The universe was vast and strange and full of wonders. And sometimes the greatest wonder was simply finding someone who saw you clearly and chose to stay. Part for the attack came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. Marcus was reviewing diplomatic cables in his new station office when reality simply stopped. Colors inverted, gravity forgot its purpose, and the air became thick as water. Through the chaos, he heard Var scream, not in pain, but in recognition. "They're here," she gasped, her form flickering between states as she materialized beside him. The collective. They're trying to force transcendence. Around them, the station shuddered as physics battled with itself. Marcus could see other beings frozen mid-step, caught in temporal bubbles as the Luminari exerted their will on local space-time. Only he could move, protected by proximity to Vara and the strange symbiosis they developed. "How many?" he asked, helping her stabilize her form with a touch. "All of them. The entire collective." Her eyes were wide with a fear he'd never seen before. "They've decided I'm a threat to their evolution. That our bond is an infection that could spread. Then we fight back." "Marcus, you don't understand. They exist across dimensions. They can unmake reality itself if they choose. We can't." "Yes, we can." He pulled her close, feeling their energy fields merge and strengthen. "Because they're missing something. They've forgotten what it means to be connected to the physical. That's our advantage." Before Vara could respond, the office walls dissolved. They stood in a space that wasn't space, surrounded by geometric patterns of light that burned with consciousness. The collective had pulled them into a pocket dimension, somewhere between real and unreal. Vara of the Luminari. 1,000 voices spoke in unison, creating harmonics that threatened to shatter thought itself. "You will return to us. You will abandon this corruption of form and flesh. You will transcend." "I have transcended," Vara replied, her hand tight in Marcus's. "Just not in the direction you expected. The human is a contaminant. He will be removed." "Try it," Marcus said, stepping forward. "But first, answer me this. When was the last time any of you created something new? Not rearranged existing patterns or explored established dimensions, but actually created?" Silence rippled through the collective. "That's what I thought. You become static. Perfect, maybe, but static. Vara and I, we create something new every day. Every touch, every word, every shared moment is something that never existed before." "Chaos," the collective hissed. "Entropy, decay, growth," Marcus corrected. "But you've forgotten what that looks like. One pattern separated from the whole, resolving into something almost humanoid." Marcus recognized the energy signature, one of the three who had visited before. "You speak of growth while bound to a form that ages with each heartbeat. In mere decades, you will cease. How is this superior to eternal existence?" "Because those decades will be full," Vara said. "Fuller than your centuries of pure thought. I've learned more about existence in weeks with Marcus than in centuries alone." "Learned?" "We know all that can be known." "No." Kane's voice cut through the dimensional space as he manifested beside them. You know all that you allow yourselves to know. There's a difference. The collective's patterns shifted in what Marcus was learning to recognize as shock. Kane, you stand with the corrupted, I stand with the curious. Kane's form was more stable than Marcus had ever seen it, as if decision had given him solidity. I've spent weeks in the physical realm, tasting, touching, talking with beings we dismissed as lesser. Do you know what I discovered? Degradation, limitation, wonder, Kane said simply. I discovered wonder. The taste of something called chocolate. The feeling of rain, artificial rain, but still. The way a Trellin laughs. The thousand small surprises that come from existing in time rather than beyond it. You've been infected too. Maybe. Or maybe I've been cured. Kane moved to stand with Marcus and Vara. The transcendence was meant to be evolution, but we stopped evolving the moment we separated from the physical. We became echoes of ourselves, perfect but empty. The collective's response was immediate and violent. Reality folded in on itself as they exerted their will, trying to forcibly extract Vara and Kane from their forms. Marcus felt the attack like claws in his mind, tearing at the connections between thought and flesh. But something unexpected happened. His bond with Vara flared to life, and suddenly he could feel not just her, but the entire network of connections spreading out from them. Kane, stabilizing through proximity. The Trellin barista who'd served them coffee, somehow anchoring a small piece of reality. The young Krellian who'd watched them with curiosity instead of fear. Every being who'd seen them and thought maybe, just maybe, impossible connections were possible. Stop, he gasped, not to the collective, but to Vara and Kane. Don't fight them. Connect with them. Marcus, what? Trust me. They attack because they're afraid. Show them they don't need to be. It was insane. It was impossible. It was perfectly, beautifully human. Vara understood first. Instead of shielding against the collective's assault, she opened herself to it. But she didn't let them take her. She pulled them in. Through their bond, Marcus felt her sharing everything. The joy of physical touch, the bittersweetness of finite existence, the thousand tiny wonders of life bound by time and space. Kane joined her, adding his own recent discoveries. The surprise of taste, the comfort of routine, the strange pleasure of not knowing everything. And Marcus? Marcus did what humans do best. He offered unreasonable, illogical, absolutely sincere welcome. You're afraid, he said to the collective, speaking not just with words, but with everything Vara had taught him about harmonic communication. Afraid that if you touch the physical again, you'll lose what you've become. But you won't lose it. You'll add to it. That's what synthesis means, not choosing one or the other, but finding a way to be both. The attack faltered. Through the connection, Marcus felt confusion ripple through the collective. They had expected resistance, philosophy, perhaps even successful defense. They had an expected invitation. This is unprecedented, the collective murmured, its thousand voices suddenly uncertain. Good, Vara said gently. Unprecedented is where discovery lives. One by one, individual luminari began separating from the collective, taking on distinct forms as curiosity overcame doctrine. They approached cautiously, like wild animals learning to trust. It doesn't hurt, one asked, manifesting as something almost like a flower made of light. The limitation, the binding.